She was known for her iron spine, sharp tongue, and rulings that never bent, not even an inch. Judge Camille Rivers didn't just enforce the law, she embodied it. But when the courtroom lights dimmed and the robes came off, Camille had a secret that would dismantle everything she'd built. It started with a glance. A moment. A man in shackles who made her forget who she was. Malik Dorsey, convicted fraud mastermind. Smooth, magnetic, dangerous. Their affair was forbidden, explosive, and fatal. By the time the truth surfaced, it wasn't just Camille's reputation on trial. It was her life. This isn't just about betrayal. It's about power, disease, blackmail, and a murder no one saw coming. Because when a judge crosses a line, who's left to deliver justice? This is a family crime exposed, where we don't just tell true stories. We reveal the ones no one dares to speak. Judge Camille Rivers didn't need to raise her voice in the courtroom. Her silence did the talking. At 42, she carried the kind of authority that didn't come from robes or rulings, but from the way people held their breath when she entered. Her reputation stretched far beyond Fulton County. Respected, revered, and utterly untouchable. She was the kind of judge who handed down life sentences with no flicker of emotion, and then drove home in silence, the weight of justice never cracking her shell. But all that started to slip the day Malik Dorsey walked into her courtroom. It wasn't the first time Camille had sentenced a charming criminal, but it was the first time one looked directly into her soul, as if he saw something behind the law, something human. Malik was 34, a man who once ran a multi-million-dollar fraud ring from the back of a vape shop in Atlanta. Intelligent, articulate, and entirely unrepentant. He made eye contact with Camille during every testimony, every objection, every ruling. He wore his prison blues like armor, but his smirk? That was a dagger. Camille should have recused herself. She should have ignored the way her stomach turned every time his voice echoed through courtroom. But she didn't. Instead, she presided over every motion, every appeal, and eventually handed down his sentence, 25 years without parole. But not before Malik leaned in, close enough to be heard over the hum of courtroom whispers, and whispered, "I'll still be living in your mind long after I'm gone, Judge." Everyone thought he meant it as a taunt, but Camille heard it as something else. She told herself the first prison visit was procedural, post-conviction review. It was, after all, her prerogative to revisit rulings in exceptional cases. That's what she told the corrections warden, and that's what she put in the official paperwork. But she didn't bring a notepad or a legal pad. She brought lip gloss. She brought perfume. She brought curiosity. The first time they spoke alone, Malik didn't mention the case. He asked her if she missed music. Classical, he guessed. She nodded, and they sat in the silence that followed, thicker than steel bars. The air buzzed, and so did something beneath Camille's skin. That something hadn't stirred in years. They began meeting weekly. At first, the conversations remained within the lines. Legal talk, prison conditions, reformation policies. But Malik had a way of pulling at threads Camille didn't know she had. "Do you believe in second chances?" he asked once, eyes locked on hers. She looked down at her wedding band and said nothing. Camille had never been reckless. She was the kind of woman who double-checked her locks, memorized case files before trial, and sent her husband anniversary reminders months in advance. But the home she returned to every night felt colder than the concrete walls of the penitentiary. Her husband, Byron Rivers, was a tax attorney, reliable, predictable, distant. Their conversations revolved around groceries, HOA meetings, and polite nods over Chardonnay. They hadn't touched in months, maybe longer. The silence between them was civil, the kind that didn't raise red flags, but it didn't raise pulses either. So when Camille began making private visits under the guise of judicial oversight, no one questioned her. She was above suspicion. She was the law, and she was crumbling beneath it. The guards grew curious. So did the inmate rumor mill. But Camille had power on her side. She changed logbooks. She used side entrances. She kept it professional, on paper. But in that visitation room, something illicit bloomed in the shadows. A hand touch, a whispered name, a stolen glance that held too long. Power in court doesn't always stay in court. And this time, it followed her home. By the 4th month, Malik knew her rhythms. The hesitation in her eyes. The way she bit her bottom lip when the truth itched at her throat. He knew she was falling. And he let her. Not all the way. Just enough. "I never asked for this," she told him once. "You never had to," he replied. That night, Camille went home and stood in the shower for 43 minutes. She scrubbed her skin until it turned red, but the guilt clung to her ribs like something alive. She told herself it was a phase. She told herself she was still in control. She told herself lies. The security footage that later surfaced would show nothing unusual, just a judge entering a restricted wing for a private interview. She always signed in. She never stayed longer than an hour. But one thing wasn't on the tapes: what happened when the door clicked shut. Malik wasn't just playing her. He was studying her. Every insecurity, every silence, every unspoken regret. And Camille, for all her intelligence, never saw it coming. The first red flag came in a blood test. Camille's annual judicial health screening revealed something unexpected. She was HIV positive. The news shattered her. She sat in the clinic parking lot for over an hour, staring at the envelope, reading the result again and again, hoping it would change. But ink doesn't lie. There had been no one else. Just Malik. Her stomach turned. She had thrown away a career, a marriage, and now her health? But it wouldn't end there. Not by a long shot. Because when Camille confronted Malik during what would become their final meeting, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply looked him in the eye and asked, "Why?" And Malik, smiling gently, said, "Because power needs to bleed, Judge." What Camille didn't know, what no one did, was that Malik had told the same lie to someone else months before her. Another woman, another position of power, and that woman was already dead. Camille left the prison that day with shaking hands and a plan forming in her mind. She wouldn't go down quietly. She'd dig. She'd expose him. She'd get her justice. But she didn't realize yet that justice, real justice, wasn't hers to give anymore. Because sometimes the gavel comes down too late. And sometimes the punishment chooses you. It began with a lie wrapped in protocol. Camille Rivers had always followed the rules, at least the ones that mattered to the world outside the courthouse. She dressed modestly, spoke deliberately, and sentenced without flinching. But desire doesn't care about bar association ethics. It doesn't care about the robe on your back or the vows you whispered years ago to a man whose touch no longer stirred anything. What began with lingering glances during pretrial hearings turned into something else entirely when Judge Rivers started making unannounced visits to Fulton Correctional under the pretense of reviewing post-conviction filings. Malik Dorsey never played by the rules. Not in the streets. Not in prison. And certainly not when it came to Judge Rivers. He'd studied her from the first arraignment. How her eyes never blinked when she spoke. How her voice carried even in silence. Malik didn't see a judge in that courtroom. He saw a woman suffocating under her own decorum. She came the first time at night. A special visit, she claimed, to review new evidence in his appeal. The guard on duty was Devin Macklin, a 28-year-old officer who'd seen enough corruption to know when to keep his mouth shut. Camille passed him an envelope, thick and bound with rubber bands. Cash. He didn't count it. He just nodded and looked away as she disappeared behind the steel door into interview room 3. Inside, Malik waited, seated, shackled, and half smiling. "You're a long way from chambers, Judge." "Call me Camille," she replied, slipping off her coat. But something had shifted in her. The woman who once quoted scripture under her breath before each ruling now dressed differently, spoke differently. Her confidence wasn't just professional anymore. It pulsed from her skin. And Malik noticed. "You wear sin well," he whispered one night, tracing the scar on her hip she'd once tried to hide. She laughed, and for a moment, she forgot the consequences. Until the blood came. It started with a headache, then the chills, a fever that wouldn't break. Camille told herself it was stress, burnout, maybe a cold, but the fatigue didn't leave. Then one night, she noticed a sore on her lip, a rash on her chest. A fever spike that sent her to the ER at midnight under a false name. The blood work didn't lie. HIV positive. She stared at the paper for nearly an hour, her mouth dry, her hands trembling, and the nurse's voice fading into static. She hadn't used protection. Not once. And Malik had never said a word. The rage that followed was violent, silent, and suffocating. She confronted him the next night. "You knew," she hissed, standing above him in the visitation room, her fists clenched. He looked up, slowly, calm, unfazed. "I never lied. You never told me." Malik leaned back in the chair and smiled, the kind that made her skin crawl now instead of shiver. "Camille, you didn't ask." She wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, but she didn't. She left, went back to her car, and wept until sunrise. Over the next few weeks, Camille spiraled. She ignored her medication. She stopped visiting the prison. She ghosted Malik's texts until the threat started. "You think I don't have pictures?" His message read one evening. Attached, a photo. Her, half-dressed, mouth parted, staring into his camera lens, unaware. "If I go down, you go down harder." She blocked the number. He found another, and another. Camille began looking over her shoulder at work, avoiding the mirror at home. Keith noticed the weight loss, the mood swings, the night spent locked in the bathroom. But she fed him a script she didn't believe herself anymore. Just stress, just fatigue. Her chambers became a cage. Her courtroom, a facade. And at home, the lies were multiplying like the virus in her blood. Camille's biggest fear wasn't losing her reputation. It was losing control. And Malik, despite his orange jumpsuit, despite the bars, despite everything, had taken it all. The disease was in her bloodstream. Yes, but the poison was deeper. He had infected her with something worse than illness. Dependency. The need to feel something. Anything. And that need had destroyed her. In her quietest moments, Camille stared at the gun she kept in the drawer, beside her bed. She thought of using it, thought of ending it. But then she'd remember his smirk, his laugh, the way he made her feel when the robe came off and the rules disappeared. That was the real virus, the one that made her forget who she was. And in the background, Malik's messages kept coming. "You ruined me, Camille. Now I ruin you." There was no going back now, not for either of them. The story was no longer just about a judge and an inmate. It was about the secrets between the chambers, and the chamber of a gun waiting to be fired. The first crack didn't come from Camille's failing health. It came from the newsroom. Late one Thursday afternoon, as storm clouds thickened over downtown Atlanta, a journalist named Marcus Weller received an anonymous envelope at the offices of the Fulton Tribune. Inside, a sealed court transcript, red stamped confidential. Case hashtag 07-481B. The state versus Malik Dorsey. Attached to it, a short typed note. Check who's been visiting him. Ask the judge why. Marcus, a crime reporter with a nose for buried scandal, didn't need a second prompt. He recognized the case instantly. Malik Dorsey's 25-year sentence had been a career-defining moment for Judge Camille Rivers, a statement to the criminal underworld that no one, no matter how polished or persuasive, was beyond justice. But this envelope suggested something else, a different kind of intimacy, something whispered, something rotten. 2 days later, Marcus published a story. Rumors swirl around high-profile judges' unusual interest in convicted fraudster. The article didn't name Camille directly, but the description, a female superior court judge known for her private legal reviews and unusual access, made her easy to find if you knew the legal scene. Within hours, the courthouse was buzzing. Camille heard about it not through official channels, but from her husband, Daniel Rivers, a real estate broker known for his calm, church-going demeanor, placed his phone on the kitchen counter and slid it across the marble island. "You want to explain this?" he asked, his voice cool. Camille's stomach dropped. She hadn't eaten in days, hadn't slept properly in weeks. The fever, the night sweats, they were getting worse. The doctor's words haunted her. "You need to tell your partner. You need treatment immediately. You're HIV positive." She'd nodded, swallowed the diagnosis like it was a courtroom verdict. But she hadn't told Daniel. She hadn't told anyone. And now, Malik was tightening the noose. The messages had started subtly. A hello at 2 a.m., a smirking photo of a letter she'd written him, now defiled by scribbles and ash. Then came the threats. You owe me. One text read, help my cousin Tyrone. His case is next month. If he gets more than 2 years, that reporter won't be the only one talking. Camille deleted every message, but the shame remained. She tried calling the prison to request a transfer. Malik needed to be moved, cut off. But the correctional officer she spoke to, the same one she'd paid under the table for midnight meetings, simply said, not possible. He's got friends in admin now. You don't want this mess coming back on you. Camille had built her life on silence, controlled, calculated silence. In chambers, in court, even at home. But now that silence had turned against her, the whispers grew louder. Colleagues offered polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. One clerk accidentally left an internal memo open on the office printer, a warning about potential judicial misconduct and case tampering. Daniel grew distant. He stopped coming to court galas. He stopped asking if she wanted coffee in the morning. She caught him once, staring at her with something like disgust. That night, he slept in the guest room. But the worst came 3 weeks later, when Camille found her own name in a sealed ethics complaint, filed anonymously, accusing her of judicial bias, unexplained inmate access, and undisclosed medical leave. She knew Malik had done it. She could feel him moving behind the scenes, like a ghost pressing fingers against her every secret. She confronted him in the one place she shouldn't have. The review room. The same small, fluorescent-lit office they used to meet in when things were still passionate, before the disease, before the blackmail. She stood over him, trembling. You don't get to destroy me, she whispered, voice hoarse. Malik looked up slowly, that same magnetic calm coating his face like armor. I didn't destroy you, Camille. You did that the day you thought you could play both sides. You thought you were bigger than the game. She slapped him. Instinct. Regret followed instantly. He just laughed. Guess that's your verdict, huh? One slap for life. That night, Camille returned home to find Daniel gone. His closet half empty. No note, no message. Just silence. She turned on the shower, stripped down, and stood under the hot water until her knees buckled. Her skin ached. Her ribs showed. Her reflection looked like someone else entirely. It was over, or so she thought. 1 week later, a new envelope arrived on her office desk. No return address. Inside, a single USB drive. She slid it into her laptop. On screen, grainy surveillance footage flickered to life. Her, entering the prison wing after hours, arm brushing against Malik's, hand slipping something into his palm. Another file opened. Her medical chart. Leaked. Stamped confidential. Her diagnosis circled in red. A final file audio. A recording of one of their last meetings. Malik's voice, low and intimate. You said you'd protect me, that you'd never let this place kill me. But now you're scared. Don't be. Just give me what I want, or I promise, I'll make you the villain in your own story. Camille unplugged the USB and smashed it against the wall. She had fought for the law her whole life. She had sentenced monsters, freed the innocent, and kept her roll clean. But now, she was cornered by her own desires, by a man she thought she could control, and by a lie she could no longer bury. The walls were closing in. The whispers had turned into screams. And somewhere out there, a journalist was digging. Her husband was gone. Her health was failing. And Malik was still winning. She opened her desk drawer, reached the burner phone she swore she destroyed, and dialed one last number. Meet me, she said. No guards. No cameras. Just us. It ends tonight. But the truth was, it had only just begun. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a woman like Judge Camille Rivers, who had once filled her world with the sound of order, the bang of a gavel, the echo of her heels on courtroom tile, the rustle of pages as she sifted through truth and lies. But on that gray morning in May, her silence was more than metaphor. It was death. 911 was called at 6:42 a.m. by a neighbor who'd noticed the front door slightly ajar and the judge's car still parked in the driveway well past sunrise. Patrol arrived first, followed by detectives. The living room was immaculate. Throw pillows undisturbed, fresh lilies in a vase. But down the hallway, just outside her bedroom, everything changed. Blood smeared the walls in jagged lines, as if Camille had clawed at her own home trying to escape. Her court robe, the black silk she reserved for high-profile cases, lay twisted beneath her. Her body bore 15 stab wounds, clustered in the abdomen and chest, deliberate and enraged. Her face was bruised, her lips split. No sign of forced entry. No sign of struggle in any other room. One detective muttered, "This wasn't a break-in. This was a message." Camille's phone had been wiped. No texts, no call logs, no trace of her burner number. Her laptop sat closed on her desk, hard drive scrubbed. But one thing wasn't gone. Inside a fireproof safe, tucked beneath property deeds and insurance paperwork, detectives found a thumb drive labeled in Camille's own handwriting. "If something happens to me." They plugged it in at the precinct that same day, and what they saw changed everything. The first file, a video. Camille sat in her chambers, eyes sunken, voice flat. "This isn't just an affair. This is blackmail. I've been coerced. I've tried to end it, but Malik has leverage. He knows everything. About me, about Daniel, about what happened in court." She pauses. Then quietly, "I'm HIV positive. Because of him." The next file was worse. Security footage from the prison's restricted wing. Time-stamped late at night. Camille slipping past security with a key card. A moment later, Malik appears, his hand brushing her back. A kiss exchange. A flash drive passed between them. Then digital copies of evidence. Court records altered. A suppressed witness statement that would have extended Malik's sentence. A parole board memo she had buried. One final document. Her full medical report unedited, signed by the same prison nurse who had gone missing months earlier. The evidence was overwhelming, not just corruption, but a fear. Camille hadn't just fallen. She had been pulled under by someone who knew how to exploit power from behind the bars. And someone, it seemed, had decided her silence was no longer enough. Surveillance from the street offered the next clue. At 1:17 a.m. the night of her murder, a dark SUV idled 2 houses down from Camille's home. At 1:38, a man stepped out, hooded, tall, matching the build of 28-year-old Tyree Dorsey, Malik's cousin. Tyree had a record. Weapons charges, assault, suspected gang ties. But most importantly, he had been spotted visiting Malik at the prison just 2 weeks earlier. The SUV left at 2:09 a.m. Camille's estimated time of death? Between 1:50 and 2:05. When police brought Tyree in, he didn't say a word. Not even when shown the footage. Not even when told about the thumb drive. But his shoes, black Timberlands with a worn sole, matched the partial print found in Camille's blood. They had him. But Malik? He remained in his cell, unmoved. When news reached the prison yard that Judge Rivers had been murdered, his reaction was chilling. He smirked. In interviews with guards, Malik never directly admitted to orchestrating anything. But his tone shifted. He began referring to Camille not as Judge Rivers, but simply Cam, like she was a memory, a possession, a tool. "She got scared," he told one officer. "That's what happens when people forget who's really got the keys. The robe don't protect you when you let someone in." 1 week later, prosecutors upgraded Malik's status to person of interest in a murder conspiracy. But proving the link would take more than suspicion. Camille's thumb drive had damning material, but no direct admission from Malik, until someone else cracked. That someone was Officer Gerald Marks, the guard Camille had bribed to gain access to Malik. He came forward voluntarily, shaken, pale. "I didn't sign up for murder," he said. "I thought it was just sex. I didn't know about the blackmail. Or the kid." His voice broke. The kid? That's when another truth surfaced. Camille had been pregnant. Only 9 weeks. The autopsy confirmed it. Whether she knew or not was uncertain. But Malik? He did. In one of the diary entries Camille had transcribed into the drive, she wrote, "He told me, 'You're mine now. If that baby's real, it's just more leverage. I felt cold all over. The court was preparing to press formal charges: conspiracy to commit murder, coercion, abuse of authority, when Malik made a bold move. He demanded a press interview. From prison, in the broadcast, seated behind bulletproof glass, Malik would orange the guilty, but the smile of the man still in control. "I love Camille," he said. "She was strong. She knew what she wanted. But the system breaks people. You ever think maybe she wasn't murdered? Maybe she just couldn't live with the shame? It was calculated, cruel, and disgusting. But to some, it worked." The public, now flooded with sensational headlines and suggestive interviews, became divided. Camille's funeral was held quietly. Her sister eulogized her as a woman who carried the law in one hand and her secrets in the other. The courthouse draped her chair in black velvet, but the questions remained. How had Malik managed to orchestrate everything from behind bars? Why didn't Camille come forward sooner? And why, when the walls were closing in, did no one hear her scream? In the end, her murder was more than just a crime of passion. It was a mirror showing the cracks in power, the risks of secrecy, and the cost of letting one man think he could own a woman just because she opened a door. The trial was next, and the ghosts she left behind? They were lining up to testify. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the first 2 rows. Cameras perched outside like vultures. Protesters waved hand-painted signs on both sides of the courthouse steps, some demanding justice for Judge Rivers, others holding posters that read, "She knew what she was doing." Inside, the temperature was tense. The walls didn't hum with justice. They rang with doubt. Malik Dorsey sat in a gray suit, borrowed from the prison's court attire locker, clean-shaven, calm, his face unreadable. Across from him, Delaney Rivers, Camille's younger sister, gripped the edge of her seat. She hadn't spoken to the press once, but today her eyes said everything. She was going to see this through. Malik was formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder, coercion, and abuse of judicial influence. Tyree Dorsey, his cousin, had already taken a plea deal, second-degree murder, in exchange for testimony. And when he took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. Tyree didn't cry. He didn't stumble. He didn't sugarcoat. "Malik called me using a guard's burner phone," he said. "Told me she was getting ready to flip. Said Camille had a stash of files that could bury us both. Told me exactly where she'd be." "What time?" The defense pounced. "Did Malik ever explicitly say, 'Kill her'?" Tyree stared down at the floor. He didn't have to. And then came the turning point, the diary, seized from Camille's safe and submitted into evidence. It was 84 pages of handwritten entries, read aloud by the prosecution. Each line peeled away the professional mask she had worn in public. "He makes me feel seen like no one else ever has. But every time I look in his eyes, I see a cage, not just his, but mine. I let a virus into my bloodstream and into my life. I don't know which one will kill me first, the HIV or the guilt." Gasps echoed through the room. Camille's words, once private and trembling, were now permanent records. In one entry, dated only weeks before her death, she wrote, "I think he'll hurt me, not with his hands, with his silence, his control. I try to end things, and suddenly files go missing. A clerk resigns. I don't know what strings he's pulling, but I feel them around my neck." The prosecution argued that Malik had turned Camille into both a pawn and a liability, that when she stopped being useful, he orchestrated her silence. They played Camille's video confession next, recorded weeks before her murder, where she admitted to using court access to suppress evidence, forged parole memos, and grant protections to Malik's associates. She was terrified, the prosecutor said, but she wasn't just scared of being exposed. She was scared of him. Then came the defense. Their angle wasn't subtle. She was obsessed with him, Malik's attorney said. She seduced him, initiated every encounter. She was the judge. She had the power. He was a prisoner. And when she couldn't keep control, she made herself the victim. They brought in psychiatric experts, argued that Camille suffered from erotomania, a delusional belief that someone, often of higher status, is in love with you. They claimed she fabricated threats, invented blackmail, and used her own guilt over the affair to paint herself as a martyr. The prosecution shut it down with one final witness. Officer Gerald Marks, the prison guard Malik had bribed. "I was the middleman," Gerald said. "Malik passed me money through his cousin. I let the judge into restricted areas. I heard them argue. I saw the bruises on her arm once." "And why didn't you come forward?" the prosecutor asked. Gerald hesitated. "Because the last person who tried to stop him lost her job, disappeared." The jury looked rattled. Delaney Rivers, Camille's sister, testified last. She held Camille's diary in both hands, her voice shaking. "She wasn't perfect," she said. "She was proud, controlling, but she loved the law. She believed in redemption. And he used that, not just her title, not just her weakness, but her heart." When the closing arguments wrapped, there was no applause, just a quiet, collective inhale. It took the jury 5 hours. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant, Malik Dorsey, guilty on all counts." No reaction from Malik. Not a blink. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, with an additional 25 years for conspiracy and abuse of power. But the court still wasn't quiet. Outside, supporters of Camille wept. Others whispered that she crossed a line, a judge who chose lust over duty. The debate didn't die with the trial. News panels debated whether Camille was a victim of manipulation or a corrupt official brought down by her own obsession. Op-eds were titled, "The Judge Who Judged Wrong," and "The Man Who Made the Gavel Bleed." But one quote silenced even the harshest critics. The final line from Camille's diary, engraved now on a plaque outside her former courtroom. "I upheld the law until it fell in love with the wrong man." As for Tyree, he received 30 years. No parole. Officer Gerald Marks resigned, entered witness protection. The baby, a child DNA confirmed to be Malik's, was placed into the care of Camille's sister Delaney, the same woman who once begged Camille to leave him. Now, she reads at child bedtime stories from a book Camille used to keep on her desk, the Constitution of the United States. The gavel that once struck with certainty now sits in a display case behind glass.